Boy, it's cold. It's like 12 degrees outside. The shop's kind of nice, balmy 50. And they got a real simple project. Guy brought me a wedding band that needs sized up to a size 12 and a half. Right now it is a 10 and a half. That's a pretty big stretch. So I got to bring it from here, 10 and a half, up to here on the mandrel. Whoops, here to here. That's a pretty big stretch. Hopefully the ring has never been repaired. It doesn't look like it has. So I should just be able to anneal it and stretch it right on up there. So let's just see. And if it breaks, then I gotta fix it. Okay, here we go. This will be interesting. Let's see, move that. Yeah, that's a pretty big stretch, so I definitely want to anneal it first. A little more heat. And I'm looking for a decent red color here. Plus this will let me know if there's any any seams I got to deal with. Hope you can see that. Yep. And one of my the head jeweler that taught me how to do most of this stuff, he said the main rule in jewelry is knowing when enough is enough and stop. So that is the main thing about metal. You just got to know when to stop or you'll melt it into a glob and then you got a problem. Alright, good enough. Let that cool. And here we go. So now what I'm using is my Kagan. It is a sweet little baby. Let's see if I can get some light on it. Yeah, that'll work. And right now, like I say, we're at a 10 and a half. So what this does is it's a mandrel. It kind of expands a little bit at a time. And like anything else in jewelry, I've said this many times, the reason that jewelry work costs so much is because of the tooling that you need to do it. This baby here cost me something like 350 bucks, and this is all it does. It stretches and it'll reduce a wedding band as well. I can shrink it. But it's all about little steps here. Let's see. That's a pretty big stretch. So I'm going to probably anneal it twice. I'm bringing up one size. I mean, I could honk on this thing and make it work, but if it was mine, I wouldn't put a whole lot of time into doing this. But since it's not my ring, I'll bring it up to 11 and a half, and then I'll stop and anneal it again. Finesse. So one more hit and then we'll hit the heat to it again. Luckily, it hasn't been repaired or pieced. It's a commercial band, so it was probably rolled off of a tube instead of actually welded together. Like if you were to have a custom ring built, it would have a seam in it from the manufacturer who put it together. And this one doesn't have that, so this will be a pretty easy stretch unless I break it. And that is enough. Now I'm about 11 and a half. So I repeat. Can't rush it. Well, you can rush it, but then it'll cost you. Alright. A little more heat. That's an oxidizing flame. I don't quite want that. I want a little bit less. Oh, shit. A bit less oxygen. See, that was turning blue on me there. I don't care for that. That means I had too much oxygen in my torch. I like it to. Too much heat all of a sudden is not a good thing. You can actually burn some of the base metals off that they use to change it from 24 karat to 12 karat. They add nickel and copper, and if you get it too hot, you can actually burn those metals out of the gold, and then it's not the same karat anymore, and you can make it crumbly. Ask me how I know that. Take this light out so you guys can see the temp here. Yeah. A little more heat. Working with gold is a little different than silver. Silver, the ring will heat even because it's a really good conductor of temperature. Gold isn't so much. Gold will concentrate heat in one area, so you really got to kind of work it over. And there we go. That's the color I like. Hit her again. Maybe 2 more turns around. And I'll stop. It's called leaving well enough alone. I think's how he said it. My old jeweler instructor. And just knowing when to leave well enough alone. Another thing he'd gripe about is I'm using these. I should be using copper. Especially if you're working in silver, you shouldn't anneal, or you shouldn't quench with steel, because it'll pull ions of steel off and it'll make things kind of odd. Alright, let's go back. Bring this baby up to a 12 and a half and stop. Slow baby steps. Get this done, I'll show you what this tool does. I don't know if you can make it out from your zoom rate. But yeah, I can really hog on this and stretch a whole bunch at a time, but I don't want to do that. Introduce a fracture in it. Straightforward. Just a little bit at a time, flip it, a little bit at a time, flip it. I'm right now at a 12. And then this ought to bring me up to 12 and a quarter. Another thing is you don't know what this ring has been through. It may have been stretched already by another jeweler and could have introduced fractures that you don't know about until you're doing this. And when that happens, then you cry a little bit because it snaps, and then you got to put it back together, and then it's got a weak spot in it. Lots of little tiny tricks of the trade that working with a master jeweler who taught me how to do a lot of this stuff is very beneficial. He'd been doing it all his life. That's all he ever did was jewelry work. And he was selling out. I went to him one time to ask him about a rolling mill that he had for sale. And in fact, it turned out he was actually selling every tool he had because he was going out of business. So I made a deal with him. I was like, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll buy everything you got. I'll buy you out if you teach me how to do the jewelry work. And he's like tickled death. So I bought all his tooling. He still had a shop in his basement. I mean, every jeweler has two shops, one at home and one at his showroom. At least if they're worth their weight, they have two shops. So you can take work home with you. And so I'd go to his house every Wednesday, and we'd work in his basement doing jewelry work for like K Jewelers and a few other places. He had a lot of accounts that he would do, like the little small shops and some of the big shops, and he'd get stuff in the mail and do that kind of work too. And so I spent about a year training with him in his basement and learned a little bit about everything. Right now we are at 12 and a half. Ugly, huh? Alright. Now the fun part. Put a shine on it. I'll tell you something, if you do happen to decide to buy a mandrel, buy a steel one. Don't go cheap and buy one of those Chinese aluminum knockoffs, because you can't do this with it. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, you wear out your mandrel. If I wear it out, I'll buy another one. But it's a tool. It's a consumable. You use it. Now, that looks pretty good. And I got a way of doing the inside as well. Knock the flux off the inside here a little bit. Just about done. And I've got an inside ring polisher here too, but I just turned it on and it didn't work. Let's see, why is it not working? There she goes. Here's where I usually wind up dropping it and it falls down into my junk pile. And I gotta dig it back out. My hands are cold. It's chilly in here. A little more. See? Woo, that's hot. Alright. Again, well enough. Leave it alone. A little bit of hand polish here. And And we are just about done. From a 10.5 down to, or up to a 12.5, with no crisis, no crying, going, oh, why'd I do that? Yeah, looks good. I'll tell you another secret that he taught me, which is really kind of cool. It's like whenever you're at your jewelry bench at a like at an establishment, and the jeweler comes out and he's got his gear on and he's doing a presentation of the work that he just did to the customer. You want to do this. I'll show you. And I see it on Facebook, or I see a lot of YouTube videos of these people who are doing jewelry work, and their presentation of what they've just done is like this. Well, it's kind of bad, but what you see is their old dirty fingernails, and you can see the dirt in the cracks of their fingers from their fingerprints. But this is not the way you show a ring to a customer that you've just done. You grab these. These are little watch glass papers. And when you present it to your customer, you do it like this. That way all they see is your work and not the tools of your trade and how filthy you got to get to do this. Secret. Like I said, he'd been doing it for, oh God, probably 50 years. And knows what he was doing. But that's how you present your work to your customer. Anyway, I'm done. I'll bag this baby up and get it back to him on Monday. Stay warm, man. It's cold out there. Later.